let's not waste time. We'll take this slow. We've got miles behind us, but miles to go. So let's just break this down to the simplest truth. You and I as one will always be better than two.
Welcome to Relaxed and Free, a clinically minded, biblically based counseling podcast. About to get started here on part 2 of our interview with the wonderful Dr. Lindsay Bonebrake. And wanted to give just a quick recap of some of the things that we talked about, really from a counselor or interviewer's standpoint. I listened, to the interview again and was like, man, there were just so many great opportunities that I missed to take things deeper. I thought, what did you think about Doug? I really thought that I went the wrong way on some of those things. Like, we went more into like the pastors and instead of going deeper into Lindsay's story. But I want to know what you think about that, man.
Yeah, we try to focus part 1 of the interviews on the person we're interviewing so we can get to know them more. And we just kind of, since we knew her, we skipped over that. I think.
I know. I agree.
We know her so well. And so, we didn't dive into her backstory as much. So I guess it's just evidence that we need to have her back on. That's what that's telling me.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, get more of her personal story in it.
Yeah, I like where it was headed. I think we covered a lot of really high level topics that are relevant today. They've been relevant for years, and they will probably continue to be relevant, right?
So you're saying pastors have always struggled?
I'm saying we're all human. We all struggle. Yeah. But I think I love how she's pointed out some of those kind of right off the bat that, but also provided a different perspective of, why don't you get to the recap and then we can kind of hit on that at that point.
Sure. Okay. Well, for me, the biggest recap was we went into how pastors are struggling and how the pandemic specifically has been difficult for seemingly younger pastors under the age of 40. That's really what stood out to me in the interviews.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to focus on, was that was really an unexpected angle that I appreciated a lot, because I hadn't thought of that technological portion of it, right?
I hadn't either. No, I hadn't either.
Yeah. So that was just a really wise point for her to make. And then another thing that she started to get to, I think, towards the end of part 1, was this notion of how our generation and younger probably, but specifically ours at least, like the middle age to younger, I don't know what that age range is, 25 to 45 or something. We think we always have to be working because...
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah. And ever since she said that, I've seen more and more evidence of it. She's actually continued to explore that since then as well. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, just a little bit. So, be on the lookout. Watch Dr. Lindsay Bonebrake's media that she puts out. Some articles and stuff like that. But that is a really interesting thing, because we grew up watching the connectivity, and it ties into our Ask Me Anything that we'll post about the technology bad for our kids,
right. Yeah.
Upcoming episode. But we've grown up and watched this technology connect us all, and then it went too far, and now it's always everywhere. And so now people who are in charge of pastoring a flock, if you will, now have to be available because they can. And it's right there on your phone. So
to clarify Lindsay's point, or Dr. Bonebrake's point, was that because of technology, there's this relentless burden to be on 24/7.
Yeah.
Right. It's not, okay, well, the church office closed at 5, or the counseling office closed at 5, or whatever.
Right.
Really, whatever industry you're in. And now it's, oh, well, no, my phone's dinging at home, or my computer chat is dinging in my office and I can hear it. And
right.
all of a sudden I have a choice between, do I finish this conversation with my teenager, or do I go check that message real quick and see if it's just Sally from HR, or is it the CEO wanting a report, tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I have a friend who's a CPA, and he talks about that they're contacting him all the time, and they've messed up all of their reports or something. I'm not an accountant, so I'm screwing this up, but they've messed up a whole bunch of things, and now it's the night before the deadline, the tax deadline. And so they're messaging him through the night, and they're like, you got to get this, you got to get this. And he's like, there's nothing I can do. Like, you needed to tell me about that weeks ago.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's really the tyranny of the urgent.
Yeah, that's a good way to say that.
Yeah, actually, I think it's a book title. I'm thinking from somebody, but yeah, which I think I got from like a Chuck Swindoll sermon. Just to give credit where credit's due.
No, that's good.
The tyranny of the urgent, where and the urgent is always now on our hip or in our pocket, or connected to some sort of Bluetooth device that is near us at all times.
Yeah, like, do you remember in college? There used to be this thing, and maybe it still exists, but there used to be this thing called office hours, right? And that is a professor or whoever, maybe a teaching assistant will hold office hours, and they just work from their office. Right. And if you have a question, you go. And some of them you need to sign up and all that stuff. I feel like we're losing that.
Sure.
And because of us working remotely more and more, because we can, that's where like her anxiety kicked in. And she says in there, it's, I was trying to prove in every moment with everything that I was doing that I was always working, because they couldn't see me. So I was trying to prove
that I'm relevant, or not relevant, but that I'm doing a job.
I'm not just milking the clock,
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's the anxiety that we end up falling into, is because since we're not in the office and being seen, right? We're not being paid to sit at a desk or in a specific location. And so your physical presence there is part of why they're paying you.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
That's no longer applicable across the board.
Yeah.
And so you can't have the office hours like that.
Well, and I think that anxiety can manifest itself differently in different personalities too. For Lindsay, it was definitely that, right? I know then for myself, it might be, I have to think about it. I don't know what it would be for me. I'm sure my wife might be able to point it out. But then for you, that might look different too,
It definitely looks different for me.
Yeah.
Because I know that I'm working.
Yeah.
Or, I know that I'm doing my job, and I check in and I say, like, hey, is there anything more you need from me? And so on.
Yeah.
And so long as I'm frequently checking in, I feel comfortable that I'm satisfying their desires for that job.
Yeah, I think I'm similar. I'm more compartmentalized in the sense that, and I have to train my counselors to be this too, because one of the things that we offer in our counseling practice is a text line for the therapist. And so, and one of the things that you have to learn early on is, the text line is not for a counseling session.
Right.
And so how do you balance that? How do you manage that? Some personalities are better at it than others. Right? some of them just kind of naturally end up in a counseling session. And then they're like, oh man, I texted with someone for 45 minutes or whatever. And it's like, oh, hey.
So free session.
Yeah. That's not what we're after there.
Yeah.
We want to have customer service in mind. At the same time, we want to keep everybody healthy. It's a difficult thing, man.
So what's the purpose of the text line? So what would I use that for you?
In our practice?
Yeah, like what's an appropriate use of that text line?
Oh, if you're sick and need to cancel a session, or if you've got a family emergency and you want your counselor to pray for you, or if you've got, I work mostly with couples, and so typically when I get a text, it's because there's been a blow up or a fight, and I just go right to things that we've already talked about in session. So a quick word of encouragement. Yeah. And to, also make sure like, hey, if I've got availability in the next day or, cause someone's canceled or something like that, I can say, hey, remember what we talked about. Go ahead and pause and promise to come back to it with your spouse. And then looks like I had a cancellation at 5 p.m. tomorrow. Would you be interested in coming in? That kind of thing. Right. Yeah. And like I said, I had to learn how to do that. And then I'm teaching my counselors how to do that. And it comes naturally to some and not so naturally to others.
Yeah. Boundaries are a hard thing.
But we got to teach them. We got to teach healthy boundaries.
We got to teach them. Yeah. And that's, maybe we could talk about that with Lindsay on her next interview.
Okay. Sounds good.
Because she loves the boundaries, but.
Oh, okay. Well, speaking of, how about we check in with her now for part 2?
Yeah, let's return to part 2.
All right. Welcome back. We're here with Lindsay Bonebrake, and we've had a first good 20 minutes of conversation. 2 points that you brought up are checking the boxes. So the church having a laissez-faire attitude towards not only church attendance, but it sounds like towards just their faith in general, maybe? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I would say that based on lots of conversations that I have with clients who are in the middle of a faith crisis or understanding what they believe, why they believe it, how they got to the place that they're in. And a lot of their conclusions are like, I'm just doing this because this is what my parents expected of me. But even when we work to branch out and try to figure out why they believe what they believe, or even looking at a different church that might be a better fit for them or anything, a lot of them are unwilling to change.
Really?
Which, change is scary.
This may or may not mean anything. So I'm going to go on a little rabbit trail here. Because now you have grown up in the Southern Baptist tradition.
Yes.
Correct. I grew up in the Methodist tradition, then in college moved to non-denominational, and then now am going to what I would comfortably call a legacy Southern Baptist church. Like they have been in the Southern Baptist Convention for a long time, but they don't necessarily market themselves, I guess, as Southern Baptist right now. But okay, all that to be said, I have noticed throughout my years that what you just said of people, they're going to church because that's what they're supposed to do, like that's their family. I've noticed that less so in the Southern Baptist tradition and more so in like Catholic traditions and more high church model is what I would call it, traditions. And so then even before that, I think you could also make a fairly comfortable claim that Jewish traditions have become cultural in that sense too. Like most people who say they are Jewish by family. They don't go to temple, right?
It's an ethnicity to them. Like it's their, it's their people group.
I think I've seen it in both the high church as well as in Protestantism of.
I wonder if it's the same thing though, like in each of those different subsets of church culture or God following people, like there is this.
I would say in mine, and not necessarily from my parents, but it was almost a fear-based thing. Like, you go to church or you get in trouble or you become one of the bad kids or like brimstone and fire. If you don't go to church, then all these awful things are going to happen. And again, my parents never said that, but my parents went to church every week.
Yeah. I've gotten the impression too from my parents that it almost brought shame on their parents. And so
to not go?
If their kids didn't go, they were shaming their parents, right? Like if my parents didn't go to church, it would make my grandparents look bad because they're raising
in society
unchurched children. Yeah, to their friends, to society, etc. And so it's part of the American stereotypical dream.
Yeah,
2.2 kids or whatever.
Two of my worlds are colliding right here in this moment. You guys don't even know it. This sounds so weird. This is like my past. I was thinking like, I don't know what they're talking about. Like, because when I grew up, like, as we've talked about before on the podcast, I quit going to church, and I was thankful for that at that time in my life. And then I didn't really feel any pressure from my mother and stepfather to go to church. There was not shame. But then when you were saying like it would be shameful for you to not go, it would be like a shame on your parents and stuff. I have felt that from a parent standpoint. As a parent, I have thought to myself on Sunday mornings, like, if my kids don't go to church with me, people are going to notice. Yeah. And then
you're a bad dad.
I'm a bad dad.
What does that say about me? Yeah.
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 Yeah. And one other wrinkle that's interesting, if you want to potentially look at the underlying cause, that this is how I would see it from a even higher viewpoint across denominations and all that stuff, is that there seems to be something missing from the kids of the other generations, or like if your parents are churchgoers, they assume that they've passed on the church bug to the kids, and they don't understand why. And I feel like it's similar to like if you watch a movie and it like changes your life, and you're like, that's the greatest movie I've ever watched. Like you assume everyone else has seen that movie and had that same experience.
Everyone else loves Man on Fire as much as I do.
That is a phenomenal movie. Yeah. It's a great movie. And a throwback. Man, what is that?
Just means I'm old.
Sorry. So anyway, I just feel like the kids end up going to go watch the movie because the parents raved about it, but they didn't have the same emotional experience with it, so that there's no connection. So
their faith wasn't their own.
Right. When the obligation
is their faith was their parents' faith.
Right.
Yeah. And so then when a pandemic happens.
Right. I will say I loved church growing up. I was at every VBS. I won the prize for most visitors. Like I went to all the youth group stuff. I was there on my birthday. No, I know it doesn't. Right. I had a wonderful growing up experience at church, and my faith did become my own then. But I know that I'm the exception and not the rule. I could tell you 15 kids I went to youth group with that their lives are in totally different trajectories. Not necessarily a mess, but they're living their life totally differently, and I think a lot of it is their faith was never their own. They checked their box, so their parent would let them go do whatever else they wanted during.
Yeah, and they didn't respond well to the culture, right? That would shame you for, right? Because some of us, when someone's like, "You should be ashamed of yourself for not going to church," we're like, "Hold my beer."
Well,
I'm gonna show you shame, brother.
And when I was growing up,
get on this horse.
In the late 90s, early 2000s, that was a huge time of shame-based education in the church. Like, you're terrible for having friends who drink. Not even drinking. You're terrible for having friends who drink, as opposed to like just really heavy stuff that was going on in the 90s and early 2000s that was, was still happening at youth group, just nobody knew about it, or you knew where you could go find out about it or do those things, whether it's drinking, sex, drugs, all those things are happening. I wasn't choosing to participate in those things, but there were kids who were like, well, if I got to be here, I'm still going to do what I want to do.
Right. Yeah.
And so
I think that parlay or it segues really nicely into your second point, right? That what ends up happening is because everyone comes to Christ on their own timeline. And so what ends up happening is you have these kids who have not yet taken the plunge or believed. And then now the rest of the posse, the rest of the VBS and all these other programs are going to judge them on the Christian morals that they don't subscribe to.
Standard.
Yeah. So maybe talk about the second point there on that.
Well, I want to make it a little bit more personal. So I want to. So you talked about your church life growing up, how much you loved church. So when you look at the state of the American church today, how does that make you feel?
Sad.
Yeah.
Not, again, I have made choices to find churches that are similar to my growing up experience. But when I see church like the Big C church, just overall, it's sad to me how many kids and families aren't getting that experience. I know tons of people who don't know what Vacation Bible School is or going to camp in the summer, church camp, like things that were foundational in my faith journey. And yes, those were those mountaintop experiences, but you need mountaintop experiences to grow and build your faith just as much as you need the valleys and the deserts and the streams and the deserts. But it makes me sad to think that like Samuel, our little boy, like growing up, those things might be just totally a thing of the past. And while there was a lot of not great and shame-based education of like, I'm thinking like purity culture stuff, which that's like a whole season of your podcast. Right? That's a whole season of your podcast. While those things were happening, there was also like great evangelism happening and outreach happening, and people knew the churches in their neighborhood. People knew who they could count on. People knew who they could take advantage of. People knew like kids would come back to VBS summer after summer after summer. Maybe they didn't set foot in a church any other time of the year, but their parents are like, yeah, free snacks and games, go play for a week in the summer. I get my house back kind of a thing. And I mean, I have scripture. I'm a terrible memorizer. Like Awanas was not
your thing.
My jam at all.
I didn't even know what Awanas was until like the last 5 years.
Right. I quit Awanas to help with the Awanas store. Like I hated it, but my mom said I still had to go on Wednesday nights and I had to find a way to serve. So I like helped with the Awanas store, which means I got to eat like a lot of candy. So in terrible times, in not great times, like that scripture comes back. Like I am terrible at memorizing scripture now, and I don't do a good job of it. And here's me telling the world that so I can do a better job.
Shame.
But that's pretty deeply ingrained. And we've started listening to begrudgingly to Doug because it's not the highest quality of music.
You have.
Clara, you have not started listening begrudgingly to Doug.
No,
but
Doug is begrudgingly listening to at times. There's a really great children's ministry at a big mega church that has little songs every month for a verse. Like it's a verse and a song memorization. And a couple of times Doug will text me the verse because it's like mentioned in our sermon and it's just the reference, but he'll like sing me the thing. And Samuel knows it too.
They scream it at people. This isn't, it's not music.
I'm not saying it's the highest quality.
Romans 5:8. Romans 5:8.
All right.
Still knows it.
It's still in there.
Case in point.
So the laissez-faire really makes you sad. Versus like angry. And then you also mentioned a number 2, which was holding non-believers to believing standards in the church. I want to explore that, but first I want to go to Google Chris. Google Chris did pull up the data that I was looking for.
I like how that's going to be my name now.
I love it.
Google
It just
Chris.
rolls off the tongue.
I like it too.
Yeah.
I don't know. That might be copyrighted, but we'll see.
Oh, everything's copyrighted nowadays. Come after me, you. No, seriously, don't. I don't have a lot of money. So the chart that I'm reading, how Americans relate to Christianity is changing. This was a study done. And Chris, I think you explained it really well. Go ahead and explain what you're looking at there for us.
Okay, so this is according to Barna. Again, the show is brought to you by Barna.
It's really not.
It's really not. It's really not. But this is a chart of practicing Christians versus non-practicing Christians versus non-Christians. And I mean, if you go back to, say, 2009, 10, you've got 50% of, I'm assuming this is just in the U.S., 50% of the population were practicing Christians, and 30% were non-practicing Christians, and only 20% are non-Christian. Where in 2000,
so if we do it cumulative, people who say that they are Christian, what's that percentage in 2010? 80% of Americans in 2010 saying that they are Christian, even though some of them are practicing, some not, and only 20% saying non-Christian. Okay.
Yep. So in 2012, that changed pretty drastically. The number of non-Christians shot up to 36%, and the number of practicing Christians jumped down to 31%. So it's below, both practicing and non-practicing are 31 and 33% respectively.
That's crazy data.
Man, did something happen in 2012?
I have no idea.
What happened in 2012?
I don't know, man. Maybe if anyone out there knows what happened in 2012, feel free to email us.
Obama's second term?
No politics on the show, though.
I'm just saying, like, that's the only significant thing that I can think of.
I also thought of the same thing.
Yeah.
And I'm just messing with you.
I don't know.
He did say that while you were in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I did. Yeah. I wouldn't lie to you,
What
friend.
great co-host.
I wouldn't lie to you.
Yeah,
I would
we're just
never lie to you.
simpatico. All right, so it flipped. That's, that's
now,
nuts.
so with that in mind, okay, and it's even, Chris, am I right in saying that non-believers has steadily increased to now?
Non-Christians actually went back down.
Oh, it did.
It just turned into non-practicing Christians.
Into non-practicing.
The practicing Christians number stayed consistently down, and now in 2020, which is where the graph ends, it's at 25%, which is slower than it was in 2012. So non-practicing or practicing Christians has gone down steadily. Non-practicing Christians went up to 45%, and it's been about the same.
Okay.
So something happened in 2012 where people just were like, I don't believe anymore. But then it kind of corrected itself, and people were like, okay, I believe, but I'm not going to go to church.
And, I have heard that from people verbally, like,
I've heard lots of people say that.
Consistently, from people saying, like, yeah, I just don't want to go to church. I've been hurt. In fact, I think a popular sentiment right now in the counseling community is like religious abuse or church abuse. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, everybody's talking about
There's
that.
that Mars Hill, there's an entire podcast.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's what goes to point two of
Thank you.
what
Perfect.
we're
Go, girl.
Great segue, co-host.
Yes.
Oh, wait.
it's past my bedtime. So what I see is when I have non-believers come to my office, which happens just as frequently as believers, they don't want anything to do with church, because if all they're going to do is be judged, why would they come to church? Because we say one thing and then we do the other. Right? We say we're here to love you and meet you where you're at and care well for you. But then we find out about some of your sin and we're like,
Yeah.
that's not okay.
Yeah,
That's
God is
not
love
okay.
unless you do this or this or this or this.
And hear me when I say, yes, we are called to judge other believers and we are called to hold them accountable. but non-believers are not held to that standard. Now, we can disagree with them.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely, and we should. But there's a loving way to do that, and I don't see that done regularly.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't see it done regularly. I don't think
we know how to do it.
I don't think Americans in general really know how to disagree and love one another at the same time
at this
right now.
point. And I think that's where where that bleeds into your bigger question: is there a mental health crisis in the church? We don't know how to agree to disagree. We don't know how to love each other despite our differences, and and in the places, and right, I'm off 98% of social media.
How do you feel?
I feel fine.
Right.
Except for like occasionally when I want to know about someone, but I don't actually want to talk about them and I just want like an update on their life. Yeah. And then I'm like, that's not a good enough reason.
We have phones.
Yeah. Or but I don't want to talk to them.
People always find
or like some random thing that I want to buy or look at, or like a conference or something that's like being held on Facebook. I can't go to that. But again, like I'm not annoyed enough about it to change it. So we see these people, and I see this happening with a lot of my teenage clients. They think they have a whole set of friends and they've literally never met them. Mm-hmm. And they think they have a whole set of enemies and they've literally never met them.
So that's the social media part.
Yeah.
And no doubt that is playing a role in the mental health crisis in America, and then also in American churches. Mm-hmm. We're actually going to talk about that in our upcoming water cooler episode. So there's a nice little segue there. Yeah, but I want to take us back to your original, like, we're judging non-believers. One of the questions that I have about because so the first thing, the laissez-faire, you were sad about, and then the second thing, I'm sensing some anger.
Yeah,
like anger towards.
I think it makes me frustrated because it's a label of where I'm a believer. I'm a Christian. I've been a Christian since I was a little girl. I'm proud to be a Christian. I know my CHRISTIAN song and all those things.
I am a C.
But then I see, and please don't hear me saying that I do it perfectly, because I can judge with the best of them.
You're very
good. I didn't need your affirmation of that, but thank you. Good grief.
You guys are doctors. I'm a subject matter expert in you, and I can vouch.
Yes, I can be very judgmental.
Don't follow that with but.
To see it happen when we're called to love people and meet them where they're at, by people who are leaders, by people who, not even just leaders, just people in the church, and they wonder why their seats are emptying. They wonder why people don't want to come to church anymore.
Yeah.
And now we're doing a good job with this mental health piece on some level, right? Talking about anxiety, talking about depression, but you can only talk about it a little until it feels icky enough for us, and then we're going to send you to the counseling center down the hall.
Right.
And I think if we talk about the pastors have different training than we do.
Yeah.
Our training overlaps a little bit at different times.
Yeah.
I hope that pastors have boundaries with their pastoral care and counseling when they don't feel equipped to do it. But I don't think that we as a church should just write it off and be like, all of you just go to the counseling office and figure it out there. And when you're okay, when you're good, you can come back to church.
Okay.
That isn't helpful.
Okay. So what I hear you saying is that it frustrates you that people are judging, right? And let's change it from judging to condemning, right? So people are condemning. And Romans 8:1 says there's no condemnation in Jesus Christ, right? And so the condemnation of a non-believer, even though Christian theology, says that if you don't believe in Christ, you're going to hell.
Right.
And
I'm not denying that.
Not denying that. But it's the overzealous condemnation of someone's opinion or someone's journey, someone's story, in an effort to try and shame them into coming to
right. I think this all comes
to church.
If you can catch a lot more flies with honey than vinegar.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily want to catch flies, but I don't want people going to hell. And I want to love them well, and I want to care well for them. Yeah. And if I'm just condemning them all the time, they don't care what I have to say.
Okay.
If I sat in the
that's a-
counseling office with you and you told me all these awful things in your life, and I was like, well, why would you do that? That's horrible. That's a terrible choice. Why didn't you know that? And that was our first session, right? Because once I've established rapport with my clients, I can say, what are you thinking?
I have a story there.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I mentioned this story in another podcast, but in my first counseling session, that happened to me, where there was just like, wait, hold the phone.
You did what?
Tell me. And it wasn't anything I did. It was something that happened to me that it was just like, wait, what? No. And they like, the whole tone of the session changed, right? To where, and then I was a 18-year-old, so I was like scared. I'm like, what
Did you ever want to darken the door of a counseling office again after that?
No, I didn't. In fact, for another 10 years in my master's program, because at Dallas Seminary, we were required to go to counseling.
Right.
And it was a completely different experience. It was so amazing. I loved it. It was great. It was freeing. It was relaxed and free.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So
Can I?
We could go.
Can I ask a quick question on this? Or do you got
we are
something?
running out of time.
Okay.
We're running out of time. So let me say this, though. All right. Because there were so many different directions we could go with that.
Yeah.
What you just finished with there. Like, because, and Doug might be thinking along the same lines. I'm sure he is, because,
We'll see.
yeah.
We'll see.
In terms of the church being seeker friendly versus the church, and then also comparing that to the gospel being offensive, because we know that it is, right? We know that ultimately deep down inside, when people are faced with the gospel, it is offensive. And so how do we balance
It's telling
all
us
that?
we're wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody likes that.
Nobody.
And we have no
turns
control.
out no one really likes that.
Yeah.
No one likes being said to wrong. Yep. Yep. So another podcast right there. And we've got about 5 minutes left. And I like to ask all of our guests a question that is the deepest, darkest question, and in my personal opinion, that you could ever ask anyone. What is your favorite movie?
This was the question I was most prepared for.
Yeah.
My favorite movie is You've Got Mail. I watch it. I watch it every year in the fall, and I make pumpkin bread or muffins. Sometimes I watch it on my birthday, because
And this is Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan.
Meg Ryan, yeah. And
in
what's the
all
dog's
their
name?
glory. Brinkley.
Brinkley. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brinkley.
Brinkley. That's what he says at the end. I love this movie because when I went to college in New York City, I nannied in the neighborhood that they go on all their adventures
All their walks in.
And so it just makes me nostalgic for college and fall. And she's just, I would my not secret, dream other life would be owning a children's bookstore. I would be really good at that.
You would be good
I
at
would be
that.
really good at
I
that.
100% agree.
Yeah.
Hey,
And
this
the
podcast
children's
takes off
outfit.
and we have millions of dollars. We're starting a children's bookstore.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm starting
I
a
think-
piazza.
I think it's
a place where people can
mingle and mix and be.
Yeah, I forget
It's
what it is.
that's from-
That's
But
Tom
it could be
Hanks.
next to the children's bookstore.
The
Well, bookstore could
problem
be in the
is,
piazza, yeah.
I think
Oh,
it's
yeah.
becoming obsolete no matter how hard I fight it. I think.
So
books
you
are
would
all
have
gonna
to
be
have the storefront, but then you'd have to have a huge Amazon presence.
right.
And the storefront could just be for, all of the small percentage of millennials that are small business day.
Yeah.
Yeah, local, shop local.
Yeah. So
That,
my friend,
they're real powerful out there, the 1% of them. And then the rest of us are shop local on Amazon.
one of my best friends from college and I, during our senior year, had a running, and it still exists. It's where you asked me for books for your front office. And
Yeah.
I gave you a list. We have a running list of children's books that we've read with our children, or we wanted to read with our children at that time because we didn't have any then. And we have a rating system, and we go in and check it, and
I love that list.
It's really great.
It is so good. Do
So-
you care? If someone's listening to this and they're I want that list, do you care if I send it to them?
No, I don't.
Or is it copyrighted?
No, it's just me and Abigail's list.
Yeah.
And we had this is another why I love You've Got Mail. We had this one day in the fall in New York. I think it was our senior year. She can call in and correct me if I'm wrong, where we got in line to get tickets. We were in the lottery to get tickets to Wicked, and we won. And we had this perfect lunch, and it was the matinee, and then we like ran into like a street fair like they have in You've Got Mail, and like bought scarves. It was just this beautiful day. And we like randomly text each other on bad days. And she's like, remember our perfect fall New York day? And then so You've Got Mail for nostalgic reasons only. I don't think it's like the greatest love story ever told, but it's sweet.
Yeah, it is sweet. Yeah.
I mean,
it's
they're both like quasi.
It's Hanks.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love Hanks?
National treasure. Tom Hanks is a national treasure.
Yeah. Meg. Oh, well. Can you say your personal opinions about stars on podcasts, or will they come back? I think Meg went a little cuckoo. She might come back.
I can't speak to that.
Will she sue me?
I mean,
defamation of character.
There could be a defamation, but you're just stating.
I'm sorry.
Opinion, so
all we're saying right now is that Tom Hanks is a national treasure.
Yeah,
that's all I heard you say.
Think there's so many directions I could go to. I will end there. Hey, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Lindsay.
You're probably the only person I'll ever do this for.
Aww. Well, for Doug too.
Yeah, but mostly you.
Aw.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I feel very special. Well, thank you very much for coming on. And it's just been a blessing hearing from you. And hopefully you enjoyed yourself enough that in future seasons, you'll want to come on and share your thoughts and opinions about whatever questions we come up with then.
Yeah, if I don't get hate mail.
Well, we cannot guarantee that.
Just filter it for me.
All right. So join us next time, guys, for our water cooler episode. Send any questions you have or any prayer requests and any encouragement as well to Ask Me Anything at relaxedandfree.com. Until then, rejoice in hope, endure in suffering, and persist in prayer. Much love to y'all.
Relaxed and Free is a presentation of Lakewood Family Therapy. Catch up on other episodes wherever you get your podcasts, and please rate and review. Every review honestly helps us bring you this content. Production and engineering led by Doug Bonebrake. Recording done by Chris Renfro. Stay relaxed and free.
Let's not waste time. Take this slow. We've got miles behind us, but miles to go. So let's just break this down to the simplest truth. You and I